Hey, so this is going to be a video about To Catch a Predator, Hansen vs. Predator, and Takedown with Chris Hansen. The acronym in the title, TCAP, stands for To Catch a Predator, in case you weren't aware. But I've been watching like a glut of these videos recently. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I don't know. Work's been kind of rough for the last month, so sometimes watching this, whenever you feel down, you just watch these goofy shows about these predators getting caught, and it makes you feel better about your own miserable life. So I don't know. Maybe that's why I like them. I don't know. Maybe why else. But anyways, I'm going to kind of talk about, whether or not these are a positive thing, I think. And as the title suggests, I do think that even though these shows are largely entertainment, I think they actually do have a lot of positive impacts on society, and they are actually beneficial to watch. And I'm going to go into why that is here. Um, for those of you that aren't, aware what these shows are, if you haven't ever seen Chris Hansen or heard of him, To Catch a Predator, the show that aired back in the early 2000s and I think the late 90s, where Chris Hansen would confront, internet predators looking to meet underage girls. I think almost every single person the show's ever had was a man. Female predators tend to be a lot more slow and methodical. They don't just hop on instantly like these male predators do after just a little bit of internet dialogue. But they're immensely entertaining. And as Chris Hansen said, when he first started the show, many, many years ago, he thought he would only be doing like 2 or 3 investigations and then that would be the whole show. It'd be like a little mini series. But it's expanded into being a whole universe, And it's had many other different spin-offs or copycats or whatever you want to call them. There is another pretty good show called Undercover Underage that I was recently watching. That's another reason that's on my mind is I like that one too quite a bit, and you have to pay for it, though I liked it so much that I bought all the episodes on YouTube. It's pretty good. Um, Not as good as the Chris Hansen ones, but still pretty good. And then there are, of course, many, many other copycats out there, some of which I do not like much at all, and I'm going to kind of go into those a little bit. But, first going back to Catch a Predator, it was immensely successful and popular. I mean, the guys that come onto the show are as wild as you could believe. They're gross, they're weird, they say all sorts of weird, stupid things on camera. Like one of the more colorful guys that came on, he was chatting with, the decoy who he thought was like a 13-year-old girl, and he put whipped cream on his nipples and privates and took all his clothes off because they convinced him in the chat that that was a good thing to do, and that the decoy wanted him to do that. And he also thought they were going to be having, intercourse with her cat in addition to the underage girl, which that's pretty disturbing on multiple levels. But it was pretty funny seeing him humiliated, nothing but his, whipped cream on his nipples and genitals when he came in, and, or I think he actually didn't get to the part where he put the whipped cream on it, but he was about to, and if I remember right, it was a while since I watched him, but I mean, some of these guys are you wouldn't believe this stuff if you didn't see it, and honestly, I've enjoyed watching it a lot over the years. And admittedly, that's probably the number one reason I like it, is just because it's entertaining. But, the more I've watched them over the years, the more I begin to think this is a little more than just entertainment. I feel kind of stupid saying this, but I think it has some educational value. Because let me put it this way. Yeah, there are better ways to learn about these kind of things out there. But if you want to read large books written by police officers or detectives or whatever, about this, I'm sure that's more informative. But at the end of the day, how many of us out there want to read a long book about pedos, or about, predators or creeps? I not really on my reading list, and I would be almost embarrassed to have a book like that around here. So, yeah, I would never read a book like that, or at least I don't have any immediate priority to do so. And for most of us, it's just something, if we're bored and we just see something free on YouTube or something's relatively cheap, then, we pay for it. And, but seeing these people live and in person, I think there's a lot about predators and about how all this works that begins to make you see just how big of a threat it really is, still even in the modern world. one thing, for instance, okay, you know, I don't hope I don't sound like I'm sounding too empathetic towards predators. Not that I, have ever had anyone I call major sympathies towards them, but sometimes, I think there's some people who do get falsely accused of these things, and some behaviors are not nearly as bad as others. Like, I don't know, for instance, like a 17-year-old dating a 24-year-old. 24-year-old is technically an adult. 17-year-old is, in many states, 1 year under an adult. I don't think that is pedophilia, or I don't know if I should say that word without getting my YouTube videos flagged, but I don't know. Nobody watches them anyway, so. You know what I mean. I think that there's really some behaviors that are a lot worse. A 40-year-old going after a 4-year-old is much worse than a 24-year-old going after a 17-year-old, I think. And I remember once watching a documentary about, it was called Pervert Park, and it had, a guy who said he had been caught up in a sting operation where what this decoy's mother said, she wanted him to, she was like 25 and she wanted him to sleep with her 16-year-old daughter or whatever. And, I remember feeling sympathy for him at the time. But then after watching so many of these To Catch a Predator episodes and stuff, I realized that the guy probably was lying, when he said that he didn't know the girl was a teenager, the mom tricked him, because almost all of these predators lie. And I'm not exaggerating. They all get on there and they just lie through their teeth. They'll say, I didn't know she was, a teenager, blah, 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 even though they have the recorded chats of them being on the show. Oh, and before I go any further, I guess I better do a quick background of how that all works. For those of you that have never seen it, like they'll have the chat with the predator where they get it, him to confess that he has intentions towards the underage girl, and get him to, prove his intent, because they want to make sure they convict them when they show up. And then, of course, it's even doubly, a criminal offense when they actually show up to the sting house to commit the offense. So, and that's another good thing that Chris Hansen always does that I want to mention that I'm going to emphasize later on. He does these always in tandem with law enforcement, these operations. He is not just a vigilante out solely looking for publicity, and certainly not himself physically assaulting the predators ever. But he works in tandem with law enforcement, and they're usually arrested and given, at least somewhat fitting sentences. It amazes me just the level of calculation a lot of the predators show on, To Catch a Predator or any of these other shows. I mean, a lot of these people, when you listen to their stories when they're in prison, they'll make it out like, one day I was just sitting on typing on the internet and some girl started flirting with me and I thought, ooh, how nice, and then I found out after I got there she was underage and now it's ruined my life, And I mean, you listen to that and you think, oh heck, that could almost be me, not that I go seeking underage girls, but you don't initially ask everybody what their age is when you're getting to know them, And but then you listen to the actual stories of these guys and you see their actual actions, and they're far, far more insidious than they let on. For instance, one guy I felt a little bit of empathy for, his name is Vincent Ambrosio. And if you search his name, it'll pop up on YouTube. Most of these will. Most of them are free on YouTube for To Catch a Predator. You have to pay for Takedown with Chris Hansen because it's new. But a lot of those, like the mini clips there, are free. But anyways, Vincent Ambrosio was like one of them from Hansen vs. Predator. And he was kind of this pretty heavy-set 19-year-old who was infamous for the fact that after he got there on set, he just broke down crying and sobbing when Chris confronted him. And he was really kind of unique too because he was wearing like cowboy boots and a hat despite being from New York City, which is pretty unique. Not even a lot of people here out in, the boonies wear cowboy boots and jeans like that very often. But anyways, Vincent Ambrosio, I remember feeling some empathy for him because he was like 19 years old. I remember thinking, gosh, that's only like a year or two over the age of consent himself. Is he really somebody that should be in the sting operation? And he did a pretty good job of making everybody feel sorry for him in his breakdown. But then I listened to a little bit of, his interview afterwards and, the chat logs he had afterwards. And first off, the girl he was trying to meet there wasn't like a 16-year-old who was like 1 year under, only a few years different from him. He thought she was a 12-year-old, which is obviously much younger. Additionally, he displayed obvious predatory, calculating behavior in the same way a 55-year-old predator would. And what I mean by that is, I mean, he tried to make sure the girl would be alone. He was very cautious, trying to cover his tracks the whole time he was talking with her, trying to give him plausible deniability to say like, oh, well, you know, I may want to come there and do something sexual. I may not, maybe not, you know, try to give some ambiguity because he thought that would cover him. He wanted to make sure, you know, that she was vulnerable. He wanted to make sure she was not, I don't know, that she was not experienced in sexual matters so she could be easy to take advantage of. He was very, very calculating, like to an extent that, this may sound weird to say, but I guess we all put ourselves in the person's shoes. Not that I ever tried to do that, but even at age 34, I don't think I could do that if I wanted to. I don't know how. You know, I don't have the ability to seduce girls my own age, let alone underage girls. But my point being on that, you know, it just appalled me how much worse he was the more I saw of him. And the same is true of a lot of these guys, you know. However, there are some that stand out, like, there are some that are really entertaining, like the naked predator with the whipped cream on his, you know, nipples and genitals that I described earlier, or the pizza predator, a guy who was eating his pizza when he came in. Jeff Sokol was his name, and he was having this long interaction with the decoy, and then he ate his pizza while Chris Hansen came in, and the pizza looked really good. That's the other reason, too. Every time I watch that one, it makes me hungry. Those are kind of the funny predators, you know. But then you have, like, the really, really bad apples. And, you know, like, obviously, two of the worst ones on there would be, you know, this one guy, I forget his name, but he was in the Hansen vs. Predator series. Gosh, I know his name, but I'm forgetting it. He was a military guy. It'll come to me in a second here. Greg, I think. But he kept trying to get the decoy to go out to his car with him, despite it being a cold night and raining. And what's really weird about that, too, is in addition to being from a military background, they found a gun, blindfold, I think it was, duct tape, rope, all in his vehicle. And, you know, he was, of course, there to meet a 13-year-old. And he wouldn't come into the building with her. He was specifically adamant she had to come into the car with him or he wouldn't come in. Now, I mean, you're innocent until proven guilty, but damn, you know, I mean, that's about as bad as it looks, you know, without actually committing the act. I mean, having intercourse with an underage person is bad enough, obviously. But, I mean, rape, kill, and, you know, underage intercourse, I mean, the three of those combined are as close to evil as you can get in this world, you know. And then there was another predator once that was a former cop. His name was Spike, and he was from Alabama. And he had about the same level of armaments in his car and might have been there to do the same thing. Though, to be fair, I think that guy just liked to pack a lot of, you know, I don't know, guns and knives and other arms on him. So I don't know for certain that he was there to murder. But the military guy from Hansen vs. Predator, I think his name is Greg. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name at the moment. It's on the tip of my tongue. That guy was obviously there to commit something quite awful. And I am appalled that he ever got out of jail, you know. However, there are also some that may not be pure evil, but they're pretty awful. And one of the most infamous ones from the old To Catch a Predator series, his name was, I forget his actual, he was a doctor, he was a cancer research doctor, and I don't remember his full name, but he was well known for being one of the most high profile To Catch a Predator people they ever had. And we'll just call him Tall Dreamy Doc because that was the username he used on the chat site to lure what he thought was a 15-year-old girl, you know, to be alone with him. And it was pretty disgusting to see a man of that status get there, you know, and go to do something like that. But what was even more disgusting is when the cops caught him and he was trying to make a run for it, the guy just threw a big self-pity fit that was just pretty despicable to watch and really made me question higher level people of society, you know, and their goodness, for lack of a better word. I mean, I know people in higher stations of power and privilege are not always better, but I like to think they're not always worse. At least I like to hope that. It gives me some faith in this world, you know. But this guy definitely was. The Tall Dreamy Doc, you know, despite being a cancer research doctor and whatever, you could tell he was used to everybody treating him as a good person because he went into victim mode. He called his wife. He was just the sounds he made. It's like, oh, oh, honey, oh, I screwed up. I'm in big trouble. I didn't do anything. But I'm in big trouble. What you were there to do one of the worst acts that a person can do. Do you have any conscience or remorse about what you were about to do? Tall, dreamy Doc. Oh, by the way, one reason he called himself that too, because he told his user's screen name. He told the girl that was the decoy that he was 29 when he was like 59. He was bald and gray. It's like, talk about being vain too. It's like, you really think you pass for a 29-year-old, Anyways, yeah, I mean, his display of self-pity and not any guilt whatsoever, and the temper tantrum he threw, flinging his sunglasses on the ground, was pretty appalling. And afterwards, he actually, there was a little bit of justice there, though, because instead of just taking, the guilty plea or whatever, he hired a bunch of fancy lawyers, and that drug it all out into a big media thing, his trial, for his crimes. And he became infamous within the San Francisco region as the pervy doctor, and kind of ruined his life entirely. And he deserved it. I feel little to no empathy for him. I mean, he was a terrible person, And he may not be evil, but he was an awful human being, and I really want to see people like that get everything they deserve. And see, the thing that I think, shows like this are beneficial about, not to sound preachy or self-righteous, but they educate us on what guys like this are like. Because how many of us have actually known people like this? I mean, we probably know one or two of them without actually knowing that those people were predators, but we'll never actually see the police reports. We'll never see the crimes they did or see the sentencing or any of that. And as I mentioned earlier, not many of us are going to go pouring through books, about police reports on predators and pervs. It's just not fun reading. But it's something you can watch at least a little easier on TV. And I would have never believed the insidiousness and the just awfulness of some of these pervs, like the tall, dreamy Doc, or the killer military guy, whatever his name was from Hansen v. Predator, Greg, I think. But anyways, another one I saw recently from Takedown with Chris Hansen, which is not as good as To Catch a Predator, but still pretty good. His name is Hunter, and if you search Hunter's Trail Takedown, it'll come up, at least the 6-minute version. The full 20-minute version you have to pay for on Chris Hansen's subscription, but trust me, it's $3.99 a month. It's worth it, okay? I would strongly recommend it if you find anything about what I'm talking about here interesting. But this guy was not quite as bad as Tall Dreamy Doc or the Military Predator, but he was a punk and a half. He reminded me of like the worst guys I knew during college, who just had an attitude about everything, who thought they could, they ruled the world or whatever because their parents were rich and they were relatively smart or whatever. And, they just thought the whole world, was at their mercy. And this guy was exactly like those guys I remember back in my college days that were that way. I mean, a lot of guys in their early 20s, early to mid 20s go through a phase like that. Even I went through a little bit of a phase like that. But mine was, I think, a little more mild, well, a lot more mild than that guy's or most other guys. But anyways, this guy, Hunter, what made him different than so many others is he had almost not just no remorse. He didn't have very much emotion, which I empathize with that because I'm not an emotional person, and people often see that as being like, I don't feel emotions. And I can assure you I do. I just don't express or understand them particularly well. And I sense a little bit of it was this guy. But the things he said showed that this guy, I think, really just felt little to no remorse or any guilt at all. And what I mean by that is like when he came in, he was actually there not just to meet an underage girl. He thought he was there to meet a mom who was pimping out her underage daughter to a guy like him on the internet for about $200. Now, I mean, that's pretty wrong on many levels, that he would show up for something like that. But then when this guy got there to do it, he was just as cool and collected as could be. Like, he was just there to buy a used toaster oven or whatever. And, I mean, he just never skipped a beat. Oh, and this guy also, by the way, was fairly smart. He was a mechanical engineering major from University of Alabama. He was not a dummy. And I have, for those of you that don't know, engineering is a very hard major. Probably the hardest undergrad major there is. I've known many engineers, and they're usually smart cookies, But anyways, this guy, even when Chris Hansen showed up, he never really lost his composure that much. He was furious when Chris Hansen showed up. You could see anger, but he didn't really express it very well. He just had this cold, angry stare. And then at one point, he actually started lashing out at Chris Hansen verbally. And when like Chris Hansen is like, he's like talking about, oh, my life is ruined. Hunter says that. Chris Hansen, says back to him, well, whose fault is that? And Hunter is like, it's yours. And he's one of the few predators that said that. Most of them will at least take some responsibility for their own actions. But this guy had zero guilt or remorse at all, which was very unique. And then you listen to his reasoning, and he starts arguing, this is entrapment, this is, wrong, and then when they asked him, even about in addition to blaming Chris Hansen for what had happened, even though nobody forced this guy to show up, of course, he showed up there on his own accord. He actually also blamed the decoy's mother, And what I mean by that is obviously, even though she wasn't real, he was like, so what did you think? Chris Hansen is saying to Hunter, so what did you think of this situation when you saw it on the internet? And Hunter's like, well, I thought her mother was kind of a piece of shit for selling her daughter like that. Well, Hunter, what does that make of you? You're the one buying her service. And even if this was a real scenario, you'd have to assume that in any situation, a mother was selling her teenage daughter for $200 to prostitute her out, would have to be a very desperate one. I mean, unless she really was just a true piece of shit. Not that that would ever be an acceptable thing to do. But I mean, I would imagine there would have to be some level of desperation and severity that would make you do that. And in his case, he was just showing up to have a good time, even if it was at the expense of some other people. And he didn't seem to realize that. It was like the idea that what he was doing was wrong was almost not capable of registering. And then he was just so almost stupid in terms of how he kept trying to then humiliate Chris throughout the show, saying, does anyone even watch your show? Why do you even do this? Just like a total punk, again, reminded me of the worst punks I knew back as an undergrad in college. And Chris is like, well, because there are guys like you out there, so that's why we still do it, And I really didn't like him. I watched it several times because I disliked him so much. He was one of the few ones I enjoyed seeing his lip quiver a little bit when the police officers came and hauled him off, because it's like, you piece of shit. You are such a punk. You deserve to spend some time in the slammer to cool off and learn, think about what a piece of shit you are, But that's what separated that guy. Is I would almost not believe that someone is capable of being that calloused and that guiltless, despite the fact that they're doing an absolutely evil crime, But anyways, there's many, many others, and also, Undercover Under Cop is pretty good too. That, of course, is one that does not have Chris Hansen, but you get to see a lot more work on the part of the women that are acting as decoys there, and trying to lure the guys. And just like with Chris Hansen, they work with law enforcement, which, as I'm going to get into now, is I think a very important thing that separates the good from the bad when it comes to these programs. Now, there are a lot of copycats that have come out since Chris Hansen started doing the To Catch a Predator series. And to be honest with you, some of them are much worse than others. I actually can't name that many of them, but if you just go search them on YouTube, I remember one that was on Amazon was called Pedo Hunters or Perv Hunters or something. And then on the internet, there's there's this one big dude who goes up and tries to confront them, and then he gets into brawls with them. And there's just a whole bunch of these copycat out there. But there is one key difference between them and Chris Hansen and the undercover undercop people. These people rarely, if ever, work in tandem with law enforcement. They are just random hot dog vigilantes that are just trying to get YouTube count views and trying to make heroes of themselves. And while I would be willing to bet a lot of the predators they find are real, we don't know that, and a lot of it could just be entirely made up for views. For instance, there was actually a recent incident that happened, and I apologize, I can't remember the school or the location this happened, but about a month or so ago, if I'm remembering correctly, a bunch of high school students tried to do the same thing. They tried to catfish a 21-year-old with a 17-year-old, which is actually legal, by the way. If there's a 5-year difference in most places, that's legal. And I don't care if I sound like a pervert. That's absolutely, I don't think, abnormal at all. Not that I did even really have one when I was 21, a relationship with a 17-year-old, but to be honest, it's not. And they thought they were like hooking a predator or whatever. And then when the guy got there, they all like beat him up or whatever, and like saying, yeah, pedos get what they deserve or whatever. I mean, that's incredibly stupid. And it's, first off, it's not their place to act as vigilantes like that. Anything like this should always be done in conjunction with law enforcement. And if you can't do it that way, well, then you shouldn't be doing it at all, Um, I feel people get very stupid about this topic because nobody wants to be seen as being soft on predators. But at the same time, people begin to lose sight of reality, This is still, it's a bad crime, but is it any worse than murder, or is it any worse than, I don't know, other severe crimes, sex crimes, like bestiality or, you get where I'm going with this. Point just being, I mean, I'm very, I feel like this sounds a little hypocritical, but I'm very condemning of, the vigilantes that don't work in conjunction with law enforcement, because I feel there's so much potential for things to go wrong. I feel there's so many, it often leads to violent confrontations between them and the predators. They could get hurt, not that, I care that much about the predators, but you are innocent until proven guilty. And I care a little bit about them, just randomly getting assaulted if they maybe didn't commit a crime, And I really, really don't like most of the copycats. And I found that one of the key differences between them and the shows that I do, like Chris Hansen or Undercover Underage, are usually that they work in tandem with the law, whereas the other ones, they just really want to make, they want to hot dog it and make heroes of themselves. And they really don't seem to even care if they're maybe attacking a random innocent person, as long as it gets attention to themselves, So that's one thing I think that does separate the good from the bad in these programs. And I will admit, I've watched some of the other bad ones as well, but those, I would admit, I think that should be illegal in the same way that what the predators do is illegal, because I think that makes a mockery of serious attempts to deal with the issue. And it also could lead to just a lot of unnecessary mayhem, But anyways, that would be kind of, the one, I guess, stop hold I would put on that would be where that's where my limits are, is whenever the vigilantes start to act completely on their own. But like I mentioned before, Chris Hansen, ever since his old To Catch a Predator days, he's always acted in tandem with law enforcement. I think maybe except for the first few investigations he did, but after that he always did. Same thing with Takedown with Chris Hansen, and Undercover Underage, Hansen vs. Predator, and there's a few others programs out there that don't have Chris Hansen that do as well. And, I admit, they're all very entertaining and I like watching them. But above all else, sometimes I watch this and I kind of wish that other people could see this, Like, I wish more people watch these programs. And again, I feel a little stupid saying that because the shows are a little bit stupid, but I think they really do have educational value to them. I think they've taught me an awful lot about the way these things work. And, there's a huge difference between being slightly empathetic towards somebody who maybe committed a crime, not a crime, but, did something that was borderline, and then the actual predators themselves, who deserve very little empathy other than just, I don't know, the bare minimum of what you grant a human being. For instance, I had a cousin that, was like 29 or whatever when he married an 18-year-old. Obviously, by the way, she was like pregnant about the time she graduated high school, which implies that he was playing pretty close to the line there. I don't know, 17 is legal in most places, so maybe not, but it's a little bit iffy. But to be honest, they're still married today. He's not a predator. He's a little weird, but I don't know. I would defend that, that and other people who do things like that. That's, I don't believe in any way the same thing as, predatorial behavior. Same thing with, like women who have relationship with younger men that are of or extremely close to the age of consent. Like, that movie with Jennifer Lawrence, No Hard Feelings, where she dates a 19-year-old guy, which is 100% legal. And a lot of people were like, oh, this is glamorizing female predators. First off, no, legally speaking, it is absolutely not. Second off, because, oh, by the way, because she's 32 in it, which is about how old Jennifer Lawrence really is, and he's 19. No, that's not glamorizing predators. No 19-year-old is going to be traumatized from having a relationship with a gorgeous 32-year-old girl, okay? Now, a 13-year-old guy, no. But a 19-year-old guy, yeah, it's fine. And people are silly and overreacting to say otherwise. But anyways, like I said, I think these shows actually have a lot of educational value, and I think they're good for society because I think there's a lot of stupidity about this subject out there. I think a lot of people, confuse, they maybe, including myself on this, maybe want to show, because we want to show empathy towards people that maybe are falsely accused for a crime that's nothing that serious, like seeing a 24-year-old or whatever go to jail for having some kind of relationship with a 17-year-old, which most of us would see that and maybe think, is that really that wrong? If it was a consensual, non-predatorial nature in particular. But 90% of them, what you'll see out there are not, of these predators are not like that. These are guys that are much older than the people they're after. They are displaying obvious signs of looking for younger, easier to control people and targeting them specifically. So there's a huge difference, and that's one thing that I've learned from watching these shows. And I wouldn't believe the stuff I've seen in these shows had I not seen it, with my own two eyes and listened to it. So, and it may be TV, and you have to be a little bit distrustful of everything you see on reality TV. But these really do hold value, I think. And I think that, for most of us, we're not, like I mentioned earlier, there's a limit to how deep any of us really want to delve into this subject anyways. So I think it's really good to watch these shows where you can, because it can promote awareness about how this world works, even if there are some things about it that don't work in a particularly good way. And plus, they're just really enjoyable. I'll admit, I have loved watching these shows. After a while of watching them, you have to take a break because you just get so kind of tired of looking at gross predatorial dudes, and seeing them all bawl their eyes out on when they get caught or whatever. But it can be pretty fun, especially if you're kind of miserable and depressed and you think, well, at least I'm not this guy. So anyways, that's just my thoughts on these shows and why I think overall they have more of a positive effect than a negative one. But, if you disagree, feel free to say so in the comment section, or just say, whatever comments you have to say about this, whatever type they may be. But as usual, thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye. Oh, one more thing before I go. Sorry, off topic, but just one thing I forgot to mention before I go. So I was going to actually have a video I made recently about speed dating, because that's what I actually attempted to do this weekend. But guess what? It got canceled this last weekend when I tried to go a speed dating session in Scottsdale. For my incel viewers, who know that I struggle with dating a lot myself, being in my 30s and all. But sorry, I tried to do one on speed dating recently. I thought it would be a good video and an interesting weekend, but as we would guess, it got canceled and they never told us why. So anyways, just one last thing I wanted to throw in there. Thanks for watching. Bye.